Good afternoon, folks. So I'm your moderator, Aisha Malik. I've got a company called ABR Logistics, and I think if you're wondering why I'm on a international government relations panel, I can explain very, very quickly. In the last 14, 15 months, I've worked heavily with the current administration. I wear about 5 different hats during inauguration last year. I work with government, military, law enforcement, Secret Service first, and then corporate nonprofit work. So in July, at the end of July through November, I was in Ukraine. I went to Sumy, Dnipro, staying mainly in Kiev. We also went to Truskovets, Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv, while we had shaheeds overhead. I met with 155 companies during that time frame. Met with drone companies and UAVs and ministers and parliament. So kind of makes sense to be on this panel with these wonderful people. So I'm going to get started. We're doing case studies in international government relation excellence. So I wanted to start with Mr. Duvier. We've been on a couple of different panels together. And please introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, thank you. It's an honor to be here today. And thank you, Katya, for organizing this. And our fantastic team. I founded and CEO of the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, established in 2008, built a network. Look at it as the UN for the business world. Uniting communities, advocating, and stimulating economic growth. We focus on 3 things: job creation, business development, and advocacy. Now everything starts and finishes with the buck. So today, fast forward, we're involved. There isn't a topic or anyone who presented over here who were not involved in any of those areas they discussed. And we also chaired, co-hosted the World Trade Week in New York City at the grand finale event we do every year. And we have the different government leadership with us as well. And we help stimulate economic growth and use our strength of commerce to influence policy. And there's so much to speak about from there further. But the beauty is that we reach out of our circles, not in our circles. Although we're called the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, it's because that I use the foundation of the Orthodox Jewish community to be able to create a platform and a body that is very strong. And from there, we're always reaching outwards, how to be able to help others, how to be able to change legislation. I just signed in a brief yesterday for Missouri. It isn't the state, isn't the place where there's different legislations needed, that we've reached out to join briefs, take leaderships in creating legislation. We created legislation like Labor Day, Economic Development Day, that I introduced that passed both houses and signed into law. One day that stimulates economic growth throughout the whole United States. I introduced a roundtable for the National Roundtable of Presidents of Chambers of Commerce that I had the Secretary of Commerce, the Deputy Secretary, Undersecretary. I pitched it to them. I said, you have to work from the bottom up, not from the top down. Government dollars get lost when they give, the PPP monies and all these different things. From the top down, $1 trillion or so, chambers who are begged and asked to be the boots on the ground have no access to it, and we don't have. We're the ones who are being reached out to by the government to help. So I said, if you're willing to change the way you work from the bottom up instead of the top down, you'll be able to be much more effective and be able to work with the leadership of presidents of chambers that I created a coalition with. So I had 30, 40 presidents of chambers with me by that national roundtable, and I got a letter from the Secretary of Commerce instantly saying that we stimulated the American economy with the biggest economy in the world, simultaneously with tremendous effect, and really seeing the fruits immediately. And that's where I think government has to go today. We have to cut the red tape. We have to stop all these having to lobby, having to get support. The people have to have a stronger voice, and the people's voice has to be recognized. We shouldn't have to go through all this legislation. And even now, we just heard this, what was it? I just spoke about her legislation fighting for Medicaid and all these tapes that people are literally lives are at risk for this. Like this, it's unacceptable. You're not talking about political ideology. You're talking about lives. Why does it take so long? This system is broken. I am proud to tell you that one of our divisions is called, we have a health and medical alliance division within our Chamber of Commerce. We built the biggest coalition of doctors, and we help with Lyme disease and tick-borne infections. We advocated, and thank God Bobby Kennedy and myself took the lead, and Dr. Oz worked on this for 16 months. And finally, we got the federal government to recognize Lyme disease as a chronic illness, and we had a round table.
Thank you for that. I actually was letting him know that earlier I lost a family member to Lyme disease as well. So things that people that are doing in this room actually make a really big difference across the planet. So thank you for that.
Thank you. We lost 2 young children, unfortunately, in the past few months with Lyme disease. It affects the mentally, the suicidal, and then it deteriorates the whole body. So it's on the mental part, on the physical part. So we were successful in being able to, this round table, you can look it up online. C-SPAN, you can look us up, Lyme round table. And yesterday I told Bobby, we have a private chat, I told Bobby, I said, that's it, we gotta update the CDC. The summer's coming. People have to know, doctors have to be aware of what tests are needed, what co-infections have to be tested for, what symptoms have to be recognized by hospitals, by doctors. When people come in, they don't even know how to test them right or diagnose them right. And right away in the chat, he said, they'll be 100% right, and he instructed his team to update it, and I sent him a nice suggestions, and they're welcome to work through it. And we hope to have I told him on 24 to 48 hours, and we're both passionate about it, to be able to have that updated. So that just shows strength from Commerce, from the Department of Health, and besides the everyday events that we do to help empower people. Many who are involved with us. We have offices regionally, nationally, and internationally, and it's about unity. And thank you for having this unity here together. Matter of fact, the president of BAU is also a partner of ours and the owner, and we work closely together with everyone.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Now I'd like to introduce you to Peter Hasey.
Thank you.
And first, let's go ahead and start and tell everybody who you are.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to tell you a story about how a president changed a narrative in national security and foreign policy in a few short years, accomplished his objective, which was the collapse of the USSR. I want to start with a conversation I had with Dr. Kissinger back in 19.
Switch it out. Just
Want to change?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was asking Dr. Kissinger, why détente? And he said, look, the American people after Vietnam had no interest in fighting the Soviet Union and challenging the Soviet Union. That's what he said to me. And I understood what he was saying. Now here, let me walk you through where we were. 1968, the election happens. Brezhnev, the head of the USSR, calls President-elect Nixon and says, whatever you do, the first thing we have to do is stop missile defenses. You can't build missile defenses. We know McNamara said he's going to build them against China, but we know it's not against China, it's against us. So we got the ABM Treaty in 1972 and a companion called the SALT Treaty, which was an executive agreement, and it was called arms control. And in all the 50 years I've been involved in the nuclear business, it wasn't arms control. The Russians had 2,000 warheads when the treaty was signed. When Ronald Reagan became president, they had 10,000. What it was we are going to agree to build up. The United States had 6,000 at the time of this treaty, and we built up to a little less than 10,000, but primarily a lot of bomber weapons and submarine weapons. So when we walked into the 1970s, we had détente and peaceful coexistence. The Russians didn't think it was peaceful coexistence. If you look at the number of countries that disappeared behind the Iron Curtain or behind the Soviet communism was 22. Started with Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia, ended with Afghanistan. I put Iran in that category because even though they were Muslim, they really were allied with the USSR. Because remember, years ago they had a prime minister that tried to give all the oil, take it away from Britain, and give it to the Russians. So we were in when President Reagan, when candidate Reagan ran against Gerald Ford for the nomination in 1976, came within 15 votes, delegates, of winning the nomination. Unheard of, challenging an incumbent president. But by 1980, detente and peaceful coexistence, arms control, had all run their course, and it was a disaster. In 1980, President Reagan ran on the same things he had said in 1976. What happened? What's fascinating is that in the first 3-4 years of the administration, his first question at his first press conference from Bob Burns, God love him, from AP, Mr. President, are you going to support detente? Well, it's like, did Bob not listen to the campaign in 1980? What did Reagan say every day? I'm against detente. I'm against peaceful coexistence. His idea was we win, they lose. Remember? When asked by, so the second question was asked by UPI, that are you going to support SALT II? Well, they did an assessment in 1983 that's still classified, except for a 30-page summary that's unclassified. It said by 1993, the Russians will not have 10,000 nuclear warheads, they'll have 24,000 under the SALT treaty. Reagan said, no, we're going to do reductions. I mean, real reductions, down not to 10,000, but to 6,000, half of what the Russians had at the time. Number two, this is a great story because Reagan was told by his National Security Council staff, we are bankrolling all of Eastern Europe with cut rate loans, and when they don't even pay the interest, we roll the interest into the principal and give them a new loan at an even lower rate. And the president told Roger Robinson, God love him, said, call the banks, tell them we're not paying anymore. It's all on, give it to Moscow. They're paying full price. All of a sudden you put $15 billion onto the exchequer of the USSR that they had to pay. Do you know what their entire foreign exchange was at that time? $14 billion in hard currency. That was mainly for arms sales and so forth. So Reagan went economic war against the USSR. Go back and read the newspapers at the time. They had a clue. They think he was just going to engage in an arms race and we're going to bankrupt the Russians because they couldn't build as much as we did. What did he do in March of 1983? I'll never forget this month. It's 43 years ago. It's extraordinary what he did. He gave a speech to the evangelicals called the Soviets an Evil Empire. Everybody thinks, oh, just some staff writer got a little carried away. No. Reagan was absolutely convinced that this was a moral, religious fight with the USSR. Not unlike what we're fighting today with respect to Iran. This was deadly, deadly important. And that's why he gave that speech before the evangelicals. The very next day, the Scowcroft Commission, which is where I was working as a helping on staff, agreed with the president's nuclear modernization program and approved the MX missile, which everybody thought was a near thing. But the commission, run by General Scowcroft, had Democrats and Republicans, and unanimously agreed that the president's nuclear modernization program was absolutely critical, go forward, and they endorsed missile defense. The next day, President Reagan did another thing. And it's very interesting is nobody knew about it except for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he announced SDI. And when George Shultz earlier that day had called Bud McFarland and said to the National Security Advisor, I hear some crazy person is trying to talk the president into missile defense. I need to come talk him out of it. And Bud McFarland played dumb, and he told the Secretary of State, yeah, come on over. He's in the Oval. He's here. So Schultz comes roaring into the Oval Office, and he says, Mr. President, some damn fool is trying to push you into missile defense. And God bless the president, didn't miss a beat. He says, yes, George, that damn fool is me. Well, to say nothing of George was a little ticked at Bud McFarland. I know that because I was consulting with Bud and helping him on these issues. But Reagan completely flipped the script. Now, what was the other thing he did? For 8 years, Mr. Nixon, Mr. Ford, and Mr. Carter said, we're going to deploy missiles in Europe, the INF missiles, Pershings and Glickums, if the Russians don't stop deploying SS-20s. Well, the Russians got up to 2,200 SS-20s, and we had not even put the missile in production, let alone put it in the silos. So when Reagan came in, everybody was in favor of deploying the INF and armed missiles, but they hadn't been built yet. So Reagan says in his first defense budget, he puts a supplemental in and says, let's go build them. You've heard of Green Economists, all the demonstrations of all the women on the Air Force base up in England. Everybody, all those riots and demonstrations you saw in Europe, 200, 300, 400,000 people, all paid by the USSR. But Reagan stuck to his guns. And we started deploying the INF missiles. And by 1987, what did we get? We got a treaty banning them all. They're all gone. Now, the Russians then, under Trump's first administration, started testing missiles that they said were not INF range, but they were. And that's why he got out of the agreement, okay? China's never been in the agreement, and they've got these kind of missiles that can range on Guam and other parts of the Pacific, which are very, very important. So at the end of the Reagan administration, I just want to give you the close with this. Oh, by the way, the other thing Reagan did in 1983 was he liberated Grenada. It's the first piece of communist territory liberated from communism since 1917. Not a single piece of real estate was ever taken back from the Russians and the Chinese and the communists until Grenada. That's why it was so important. So when you add in what the president did with respect to March, which I just went through, did diplomatic stuff, did military stuff, did the moral question with respect to what are the lessons? A new narrative must be bold and clear. Number two, it has to have very clear objectives. And those objectives have to be against the status quo, but not enough just to be against the status quo. You have to say why. Détente and peaceful coexistence, and all this was putting us behind the 8 ball. The Russians had a phrase, they said, the correlation of power now favors us, and we're going to be able to defeat the Soviet Union. Defeat the United States. That's what they said in January of 1980. They were convinced they were winning the Cold War. And the third thing is the conventional wisdom you're probably going to reject, and you're going to get all sorts of grief for it. The Washington Post, the New York Times, CBS News, they will have editorials and news stories day after day after day condemning you as being either stupid or uninformed or dangerous, which they did with Reagan. Part of my job was to collect all this stuff. This was before the internet. So it was fun. You could collect all this stuff. And the three things that were just bold-faced falsehoods because they were either people stupid or uninformed. Everybody was saying, well, we're going to do containment. You did containment once in Korea. George Kennan opposed sending the troops to Korea by Truman. He opposed everything Reagan did. And if 22 countries flipped from the West to the communists in just the 1970s, how was that containment? Number two, arms control. We didn't do arms control in the 70s. We did, let's both agree to build up to obscene levels of warheads, and we'll call it arms control because the people won't know the difference in the media report because they like the idea of arms control, which is what they did. And the third thing is, which is really, really important, no missile defense. No missile defense. Kill it dead. Because we want to hold each other mutually hostage, because if someone tries to do missile defense, it means they're trying to get the drop on you. Ask yourself this question. If the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and all our allies in the Gulf had zero missile defense in the last month, where would we be? Where would Israel be without missile defense? And then you ask yourself the question, how successful was missile defense since last June? Add that in. Over 40,000 rockets, missiles, and drones have been fired at everybody in the region, but primarily Israel. But add yourself, how many did we intercept? Between 87 and 93% of the long-range missiles and 99% of the drones. Why? Because of Ronald Reagan's SDI speech and Israel going along with Arrow and Iron Dome and David Sling. extraordinary technically. These systems can change course in mid-course without any human being in the loop, because they know they can talk to the other interceptors. They know where they're going. Now, having done that, undo the bad narrative, put in your own narrative, and then do 5 things. He went to war against the Soviet Union. He did peace through strength, which is the military aspect. He said this is a moral fight for the West. We've heard that from this administration as well. And an information war, which we were terrible at, but President Reagan hired Mr. Wick, who was a Hollywood producer, and he said, take over the Voice of America and let's get going, because when I went over there, when we did this, they said, well, we have to be like CBS News. We have to be balanced. So no, you're the United States Information Agency. You are not the United States and Soviet Union Information Office. I don't want balance. I don't want you to give the Soviet side of stuff. And that was critical, and that's one thing we're bad at in this country historically. We just have been bad at, which we need to do a much better about. And finally, missile defense, air defense, counterterrorism, counter cyber, counter space, that's all critical, which we always were told NASA's good space because going to Mars, but military space, ooh, they're bad because we want to keep the peaceful uses of space. But the bad guys don't go along with that idea. They got stuff up there that can take out our space assets. And if you take our space assets out, it's over. Game's over. And the cyber can go after our grid. They can come after our communications. Okay, they can come after our waterworks. And we're not protecting them because the utility says, well, that's not my job. That's Pentagon's job. Pentagon's job says, well, that's the utilities, boys and girls. And the president says, oh, Congress will do it. And Congress says, make the president do it. So we've been fighting now for 50 years, trying to figure out how to protect our infrastructure. And if we don't, the bad guys are going to get the drop on us, because as the head of, remember Soleimani, the Iranian who was killed? I'm going to finish with this. Before he died, he was asked about attacking the United States, and he said, I know where your 32 most critical infrastructure nodes are. That's a direct quote from Governor Gilmore of Virginia's commission on protecting the United States infrastructure. It's a direct quote. They identified the 32, their railroad crossings, natural gas pipelines, various places in the United States. You shut those down, you cripple the United States. Period. Over. You think the Straits of Hormuz are bad. So it was interesting. Soleimani had read that, and he understood what to attack to bring the United States down. The lesson in all this is Reagan became president in January 1981, and by 1990, Gorbachev signed a decree saying the Soviet Union was ended. That's an extraordinary achievement. The lessons are we may not be able to do that again, but we know how we did it. You adopt a narrative, you get rid of the narrative that is the bad one, which is conventional wisdom, and then you implement your policies and objectives without failure. And you're going to get beat up, you're going to get smacked around, you're going to be criticized, you stick with it, okay?
I'm just going to tell you now, 5 decades of experience. Absolutely. 5 decades of experience in nuclear deterrence, arms control, and strategic security. I could literally sit with you and have a drink and beer and stay for a long time. Our next speaker, we've got Valeria.
My name is Valeria Smian, or Valeria Smian, and I'm head of communication for Alatra International Public Movement, which is a non-profit, and we also have a think tank and the analytical center where we work on different issues. First of all, it's science, and it's the studies of the climate, geodynamic processes within the planet, and micro and nanoplastic. And also we work on the protection on fundamental freedoms and human rights. And here I would like to bring the story actually and the research that we come up with, and which will be very, very useful for everybody, as everyone in this room is working on or media or law or advocacy or lobby, right? And each of you know how the narratives are shaped in the media and how all of that working. And unfortunately, not this always work in a good way. And today I want to focus really on the vulnerability of the information space and how it's used to deliberately undermine the fundamental human rights and freedoms like freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and the right of fair and public judgment. So we see sometimes how the entire groups suddenly subjected to coordinated campaigns against them in the media, and to be honest, it's really accidental. And our open source analysis has identified specific mechanisms behind such attacks. That's what we've been studied for a while. And we come up with the transnational anti-cult network that operating right now globally. Uh, Basically, it's a structure from the Russian Federation and Russian operational core, but with the key hubs in the European Union and also within the United States as well. So what are they doing and how does it work? So using the pool of pseudo experts and the biased media, this network applies labels such as cult or sects in Europe, that's mostly, and or dangerous group. So and they're using this as tool to suppress and any specific targeted groups they chose. So they are converting media campaigns of dehumanizations into effective legislative prosecutions. So the first they apply the labels and then they use that as a pretext to prosecute people on the law level. But how do we know all of that? How did we study that? Because we are the ones who become a victim and the target of one of that transnational network comes from the Russian Federation. And first of all, we are as an international public movement and the think tank, we're a group of experts, scientists, researchers, and a lot of volunteers across the world. And basically our researchers, they are doing the research on the open source data as a lot of analytical centers, and we are operating on the, as I said already, the climate issue, environmental risk, human rights, and public diplomacy. We as well also organize a lot of conferences on the Capitol Hill just within this years for the protection of fundamental freedoms and the supporting of Ukraine. And we were the ones who, of course, right from the beginning, 2014, were supporting Ukraine and condemned Russia's armed aggression against Ukraine and advocated to defend, Ukraine on international platforms. And of course, we were not that convenient for the Russian Federation, and they started this campaign in 2015 against us. And basically, those anti-cult networks that we studied, they were of course affiliated with the Russian intelligence services. And by analyzing this attack, so what we can say briefly is that we uncover a clear algorithm used by this network against any undesirable group. This process consists of four factual confirmed stages. So stage number one, it's a creation of a stigma. For example, a dangerous cult label is attached to any groups and then used in the media space. Number two, a media dehumanization. A factory of fake and distorted information is launched. The goal is not to critique viewpoints, but fully dehumanize the group, their target. Stage number three, it's a social exclusion, a violence enabling environment created, and the harassment, firings at work, for example. So it's really have the consequences. The physical violence against the stigmatized groups begin and preserved as socially acceptable. So society accept that when, for years, for example, right? These labels you can hear and read in the media, then society accept that and not speaking against about that. And stage number 4 is like a legal pressure, a lawfare. The informational stigma becomes a basis for legal sanctions. So under this scenario in Russia, for example, *ALLATRA MUNDA was first declared undesirable, and then next step is extremist group, including, of course, for open support for Ukraine. What does this process mean in practice for all people? So each stage of this anti-cult stigmatization results in basically broken lives, to be honest. Victims in this network face unlawful dismissals, bullying, even they're bullied, like their children bullied at schools, arrests, fabricated charges, and imprisonment under unbearable, conditions. And its most extreme manifestation is the dehumanization technology leads to horrific consequences: physical violence, tortures, forced organ removal. That's cases we know from China, and even the provocation of mass shootings as individual whose psyches has been radicalized by these anti-cult networks, propaganda, take up weapon and clean society from the cult member. That's how it works. Then
We've had experience with that directly, actually, with the election. So you guys have done an incredible job going all the way up through the current administration, making things change for Ukraine for the better, for the betterment of the entire planet, to be honest with you. So
thank you so much, Aisha. Thank you for adding that. Yes. As you said, we really involved into the human rights work very, very actively, and we now expose this anti-cult network and speaking loudly and learning and sharing their tactics, how they work, how they operate. This is a real case study of our organization, and basically we also seek to convey a critical understanding for everybody that this network's toolkit can be used against absolutely any organization, any groups. That could be a religious group, can be a civic group, even political one. That's what we can hear as well. Anyone really can become a target. So, and our data show that this anti-cult infrastructures of hate effectively coordinated by this, as I said, Russian intelligence services, and actively being exported, unfortunately, to the West. And its agents are already operating here on the American soil as well. That's what we can see. And why this threat to the national security? That's a big threat to national security. And we understand because that's work on the division of the people and infiltrate so much hate into different groups against each other. And because this network includes more than just media representatives, because based off the obtained OSINT data, it is well coordinated syndicate that includes pseudo experts, radical activists, loyal journalists, and in some countries even representatives of the law enforcement and prosecutorial bodies. And this technology that they use to prosecute people is universal. Today, they're testing these methods of dehumanization on religious groups, social movements, or scientists, but tomorrow they're going to practice it on politicians, for example, in political, and basically do a political sabotage. So using these algorithms, the anti-cult algorithms, it is possible to artificially incite protests against an undesirable politician, demonize a political party, pit one social group against one another, and provoke deep civil division, as I said, so under the guise that they are protecting society from dangerous cults, this transnational structure can covertly interfere in the internal affairs of state and undermine the foundations of the democratic institutions from the within. So they infiltrate to the government, to the any institutions, and basically undermine it from within. So, and for everyone who is working in advocacy and human rights protection, the language of anti-cult should be absolutely a red flag. So, if you hear such narratives like cult, dangerous groups, demand facts. That's what is so much important. Ask questions. Where is the evidence? Where is the due process? Where is the basic respect for human dignity? Actually, everything should be factual information, right? So, most importantly, ask what hidden interests are being pursued by the media and individuals using these terms, and who funds this? Who funds those groups and whose interests they operate? That's the question that we all have to ask when we hear such narratives, because this is already on the American soil. And I would like to conclude with the very, clear message here that basically, as long as we study and we understand how they operate, we understand that as long as these transnational anti-cult networks will operate, with impunity, there can be no true real freedom, because they violate freedom of speech. They persecute people, they target them, and they violate the religious freedom and basically the democracy itself. So human rights cannot be protected if we allow industry of hate to replace facts and facts with labels, basically. The activities of this network, its agents of influence and its sources of funding must be officially investigated. That's what we demand. Only by bringing them out of the shadows into the real legal accountability, we can protect the national security and all the democratic, institutions, and ensure that the rule of law and human dignity really comes first. So we encourage everyone to study about that, to learn and see, because that's one of the tool that is comes from the Russian Federation to Europe and the American soil that we studied, that we learned, and that is undermining the national security of the countries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And honestly, what she was saying, everything really does apply nowadays to what we're going through in the division that we have in our country. So I've noticed that we tend to have a very quick whip. Let's blame it on the media. Let's blame it on the journalists. Let's blame it on. They all have jobs. We all have jobs. You get a story, you hear it, you're going to report on it. I encourage you, exactly what she said, go with the facts, find the receipts, have that question. It's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. I have people that get mad at me all the time. They're like, why are you always asking a million questions? Because I want to know where it came from. Did they actually get a case did they get found guilty? I was in Ukraine, and literally this topic came up about Alatra, and somebody from Parliament had asked me the question, they're under investigation. I said, has there been a verdict? And he said no. And I go, well, then you have no idea who they are. And I know the people from the just a few of them that are over here. I can promise you that's not going to go through, and we were right in the end. So thank you for everything that you guys do. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Now we have another beautiful Ukrainian with us, who's also.
I can introduce
Yeah.
myself. Yes, it will
Sorry.
be easier for pronunciation purposes. My name is Irina Kapanica, and lately I'm closer and closer from defense industry, and not just lobbying in defense industry. I want to pay your attention about some highlights about lobbying in defense, but me personally now more in military production. We created a company, Mutual, together with their ex-head of innovation department of our Ministry of Defense, who is co-developer of Delta. I guess everyone knows our Delta. And together with some head of military units and some military engineers. But I don't think that it's very interesting for you what's in Ukraine, but I would like to pay your attention about some points which I consider can be very dangerous, can become some moment very dangerous for the Western society and for the Western national security of different countries. What I see is that Institute of Lobbying, which is great from the beginning because it on the first steps it reduces corruption and it makes more transparent industries, yeah. But as stronger it becomes, it starts playing bad joke with the industry. Example of defense, like big, huge corporations that owns a lot of technologies. They have the biggest budgets for lobbying. I mean, it's obvious, it's normal, it's just specific of industry. And they are lobbying the full package of the full range and package of their products. But if we see inside, what is it? And I guess I can share already these numbers because it's already like our General Zaluzhny was sharing it publicly that like 70% of everything, all technologies that been testing on the front line just not working. Including the technologies of the huge biggest world corporations. Our engineers and militaries had to rebuild it, somehow adopt it. Why it happens? Because, for example, let's take an example, like we have 10 small companies with 10 cool technologies. Some big corporation, military corporation, buys these companies. Then can be that after these cool technologies, each of these groups have not so cool technologies, for example. But it's already part of the range of products of big corporations. And so it lobbying a good one, it's lobbying the whole package. And sometimes what I can see from my recent negotiations with and some meetings with European countries, that, for example, army of some, I think it's not very correct to name the country, but it's like one country that
Let's not get you in trouble.
I still want to go this country. So in army can have, for example, drones that cannot even fly. I mean, it's been probably tested on their polygons, but when it's been tested, I'm not talking about frontline, I'm talking about our polygons together with other technologies and some ground systems, and it makes some waves, some whatever, and it just cannot even fly. I mean, if it's not being prepared for the war, it's not like that we want the war. We don't want the war anywhere in this world. But everyone needs to be strong and prepared because the countries like our enemies, dictatorship countries, terrorist countries, they study all the weaknesses, and there is more possibilities to become a victim of these countries being not prepared. If they understand that, oh, no, this is strong, guys, it's better not to go there. So better to be prepared. Need to be flexible. I don't see flexibility. Even on the level of doctrines, it's need to be changed. And I think that such people as Mr. Husi can become a game changer. Started with the changing on doctrine levels. The strategy of national security, of national defense, because the strategies that you can make a plan for the next 10 or 20 years, it's impossible now, it doesn't work. Technologies change each 2, 3, 4 weeks, each few months, it changes completely. It's just impossible to plan something with such a long term. So all new doctrines, they just need to be flexible. They need to accept this situation that's just world changing. It is as it is.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So
Along the lines of that, when I was in Ukraine, and again, I'm just only mentioning this because I just got back from there, but one of the strongest things that is very intrinsic to what we're going through right now is that we're not dealing with regular rules of war that we used to back, for the last 100 years. They're bombing churches, they're taking children, they're indoctrinating them, which I know has happened in the past, correct? Because you've got 5 decades of experience, so you're gonna have to check me if I'm saying something wrong. But at the end of the day, went to drone companies and went to all these things, and so I've been screaming from the rooftops since I got back that like some of the narratives that have come out, they're not exactly accurate. We need to make sure that we're going over this. So when I was up on the Hill during Ukraine Week, I actually invited senators and I invited House and Congress, and they said, if you want to come, I'll take you to Ukraine. We'll go across the borders. We had Shaheeds flying overhead. And see for yourself, Pastor Mark Burns, very close friend of ours. He's He was nominated, what was it, listed by Time magazine as Trump's closest spiritual advisor. Very good friend. He actually had a narrative that he tells everybody all the time. I had no idea. It was a wrong narrative, completely against Ukraine. Now he's one of the strongest fighters for the country. I'm right there with him. We're dealing with a different war now, and so everything is going to be changing, just like you said, just with all the work that you guys, everybody that's on this panel. So, definitely encourage you. And if we have any questions, I think we've got some great speakers up here. So if anybody has any questions. All right, great. Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.